We'll have a second round. Senator Warden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Crapo, thank you all for being here today. You know, we take up 3 issues today that all deal with certainty in the market and how we repair the markets that were so badly broken and demonstrated in this huge financial crisis. Obviously, with GSE reform, I very much agree with Senator Crapo and many of my colleagues, the urgency of the moment. We have got to get this resolved, and we've got to get it resolved now, and I think that's what the bipartisan bill is a first step toward that. Also, the nomination of Mary Jo White, if you listen to the hearing, was very much about the importance of getting the rules in place going forward in response to what we discovered was wrong during the financial crisis. The CFPB nomination is also the same. This is an agency that was designed to deal with the fact that the consumer credit market wasn't working and people were getting cheated. We now have a nominee whom I believe everyone has described as balanced and effective, and yet, despite the fact that I think he deserves an up or down vote, what's happened is we have no vote on him. We can't get somebody confirmed, and the consequence of that is to produce uncertainty in the market, which just seems to me to head in the wrong direction. We need a strong, effective consumer agency. We need an honest consumer credit market, and that happens when we get a director confirmed. You know, going forward on GSE reforms, I want to hit a couple of things we haven't talked about because I think they're important. One of them is the role of complex financial agreements. We discovered, for example, in the consumer market that agreements about mortgage servicers were so loaded with fine print, lots of tricks, lots of variations on how they would be compensated, for example, that they left open the opportunity for misrepresentations, for deception, for outright fraud. And now the consumer agency has come up with uniform servicing agreements to try to deal with that and get an honest market where everybody knows what they're dealing with. You master the one agreement, you've got it. The question I have is about securitization agreements. Securitization agreements, I actually looked at some of those things, are complicated, very difficult to read and understand and to evaluate the risks associated with transactions there. And I think the evidence shows left open the opportunity for misrepresentations, for deception, and for outright fraud. So the question I want to ask is, would you support having a standardized security agreement? And we'll just go down the line. Ms. Ratcliffe, you're closest to me, so you can start.
Yes, I do. And may I?
Please.
Right. Sure. I mean, I do think
when you're saying yes, you get to go longer. Yes.
The model, to your point about creating infrastructure and standards and transparency that should apply to all participants in the market, you know, when accessing the standard mainstream Fannie Freddie market of old, you know, as a borrower, all I had to do was, you know, back in the day, look in the newspaper, and I knew what I was getting, and I was able to see. And by the same token, investors on the other end of that transaction knew exactly what they were getting. And so obviously there's a model to be learned from that.
Very good explanation. Thank you, Ms. Ratcliffe. Mr. Wallison?
Yes, I would agree that it would be a good idea to have a standardized kind of securitization agreement. They are enormously complicated, so it's not the sort of thing that Congress can legislate. But if you get the lawyers together who do these things and you have commentary on the pattern that is adopted, I think it might be worthwhile.
Good. That's very helpful. Thank you. Senator Martinez?
Senator, we did not consider that issue as part of our commission report, but it strikes me as a very good idea.
All right, good. Thank you. I want to ask a question about risk pricing. You raised the point, Mr. Wallison, that you think the government never gets it right. I think Senator Martinez said, wait a minute, remember the FDIC insurance model? I think they did a pretty good job. So let's call it a mixed record. I want to ask the question in the other direction, and that is the private market. I just went back and thought about this one. In the 1900s, we had the Mortgage Title Insurance Company, a private insurer of mortgages. In the 1920s, we had the Mortgage Guarantee Company. I think both of those ended up collapsing in a big scandal of fraud and deception and improper pricing. And then in the 1920s, in the 2000s, we had the private label insurers, which I believe a significant number of those now are either already bankrupt or in the process of winding down. A lot of trouble. So the question I want to ask, if you want us to move entirely to a private market, do we have some good examples of when the private market has done a good job of insuring mortgage pools? And I think I should start with you, Mr. Wallison.
Yeah, well, there are a number of things you have to look at when you consider this issue. Unfortunately, because Fannie and Freddie had dominated the
I'm sorry, in the 1900s and the 1920s, I don't think we had Fannie and Freddie.
Okay, let me say generally then simply that yes, the private market fails from time to time.
Did it ever succeed?
But the taxpayers, if I may continue, don't have to bail them out.
My question is, can you give me an example of when the private market succeeded in correctly insuring mortgage pools and didn't end up in collapse when the housing market reversed?
I cannot do that because we have always had the same system of government involvement in the housing business, in the housing finance business, for the last 40 or 50 years. The problem that happened, if I can go back up to what is actually recent, the problem that happened recently after the 2008 financial crisis is that in order to provide mortgages for the residential market, these mortgage institutions, insurance institutions, had to agree to use Fannie and Freddie's
Mr.
underwriting
Wallison,
standard.
we've heard your arguments about Fannie and Freddie. That's why I started with the examples when there were no Fannie and Freddie. I'll just stop at the point. You're asking us to bet the entire mortgage market on a model that has absolutely no proof that it will work. That may be a problem. My time is up, I see, so I'll go back to the chairman.